last week's story called Don't Look
Red by Jason Connery.
Do you believe in the old saying, opposites attract? Certainly seemed to be true of Emma and her fiancé David. The pair of them couldn't have been more different. Emma was sentimental and superstitious. She was the type who believed in UFOs, fretted when she broke a mirror, and wouldn't even get out of bed on Friday the 13th if Russell Grant advised against it. David, on the other hand, was a sensible, stolid man. The kind of chap who thought astrology was for unstable types, who swore they'd spotted Elvis by the baked beans in Tesco. So David wasn't too understanding when Emma told him she couldn't move in with him right then because Mercury was in retrograde. David was stunned. He couldn't have been more surprised if she said she was leaving him for a little green man from Mars whose hobbies were bending spoons and making corn circles. But we're engaged, Emma, he protested. It makes sense for you to live with me. I've worked out that aside from the rent, we'd save at least £15 a week on travel, phone calls and bills. It wasn't the most persuasive or passionate of arguments. It wasn't exactly, come live with me and be my love. Even David could see that. Besides, I want us to be together all the time, he added swiftly. So just forget about this astrology stuff. It's just nonsense. Emma replied that he was only saying that because he was a Capricorn. The truth was, Emma wasn't really sure just why she didn't want to move in with a man she loved. Maybe she simply felt some of the romance of her wedding day would be lost if she went in for what was colourlessly termed cohabitation. Of course, moving in with David could have been cosy and convenient. Emma's lease on her flat had run out. She was soon to be made homeless. And finding a cheap flat in London close to her work was going to be about as easy as finding a hairpin in a haystack. Still, she set out flat hunting in an optimistic mood. The optimism faded fast. She spent the best part of a month viewing dank basements and leaky attics. Then a friend at work offered her a solution. I know the perfect place for you, she said. My boyfriend's coming to live with me, so his apartment is empty and it's cheap. Her friend assured her she would love the flat. It's romantic, old-fashioned, very you. In fact, Emma did fall in love with the flat the minute she set foot in a dimly lit hall. She walked from room to room, admiring the beautiful cornices, the large windows, the original fireplaces. She could picture herself cozy here on cold winter evenings. It has a wonderful atmosphere, she said to David when he came along to see the place a couple of days later. It's also got wet rot, said David, kicking a skirting board. But Emma took no notice. She moved into the flat and felt at home straight away. But don't you feel lonely living by yourself, friends asked. Emma told them honestly that she didn't. Strangely enough, she never felt alone in the flat. Sometimes when she sat in front of the fire on quiet evenings, it was as if there was someone else in the room with her. Occasionally, out of the corner of her eye, she'd think she'd seen a shape, some movement. But when she turned her head, all was still. I have a feeling the flat is haunted, she told David once. Oh yeah, and there are fairies at the bottom of the garden, he teased her. She decided not to tell David when odd things started to happen in the flat. Lights she swore she'd switched off were left on. Doors swung open by themselves. There was even the odd whiff of pipe tobacco wafting out of nowhere in the sitting room. Most of the time, none of this held any terrors for her. But then one night, she made the mistake of staying up for the late-night horror movie. Once she'd watched Christopher Lee sinking his teeth into several virgins, she felt a bit uneasy. Ridiculous, she knew, but in the shadows, the flat suddenly seemed menacing. She rang David, hoping for some comfort, but he sounded preoccupied, edgy, in a hurry to replace the receiver. Look, Emma, he said, you'll let your imagination run away with you, as usual. Finally, she drifted into a fitful sleep. She woke around 3, having dreamed she'd heard a door creaking open and footsteps in the hall. She sat up to try and shake off this silly nightmare.
Emma, the central character in our new love story, is sure to be glued to our video stars later in the programme, mad as she is about all things mystical.
Can I come in now?
Go on then, because I've forgotten the rest of the story now.
Oh, okay. So you need me for certain things? Yes. Now, what, when you...
It's very pink today, isn't it? Have you noticed that?
Very pink. Well,
Very, very pink. Pardon? Oh, yeah, right.
Come on, Anne. Oh, sorry. Oh,
got to make up for it. It's really hot, that one. That's why I've handed it to her without the handle, you know.
Yeah, anyway, look, when we met her yesterday, you'll recall, she thought her new flat was haunted.
Aye. Not that her fiancé David took much notice, of course, although he's a man, a very caring person generally, as we all are. However, he didn't take any notice of that.
I'm glad you got that in there, because I was going to say something rude, but then I won't. Now, Emma then saw a figure standing by the end of her bed, and it gave her a bit of a turn, frankly.
And it wasn't Father Christmas, was it? No, it wasn't.
Emma convinced herself she must simply be dreaming. There couldn't possibly be a ghost standing large as life, or rather death, at the end of the bed. This was no more real than the time she dreamt she met Kevin Costner in Lincoln green tights down the laundrette. She decided to pinch herself and blink hard, then do the only thing a girl can do in this situation. She screamed. The ghost screamed back. "What the hell is going on?" it yelled. Maybe David was right. She was getting neurotic. Imagining a ghost that swore at her was just too much. "Go away! You don't exist!" Emma cried in a voice that could have scared the horns off Lucifer himself. The apparition didn't budge. "What are you doing in my bed?" it said. Emma was confused. Who did it think she was? Goldilocks? Suddenly, more angry than scared, she reached out to switch on the bedside lamp, flooding the room with light. The man who stood before her, blinking and scowling, was not exactly ethereal. He was 6 foot and extremely solid, with a very healthy tan for one of the undead. "Who are you?" he demanded. What was this? A burglar requesting a formal introduction? More to the point, who are you, and what are you doing in my flat, she asked, struggling to keep her tone calm despite her hammering heart. "This is my flat," the man said. "I own this place. I'm Tom Shaw." "Oh, I'm renting the place from your previous tenant. I'm Emma Johnson." Foolishly, she made to shake hands like the Queen at a command performance, except that Emma was wearing the type of pajamas that wouldn't look too good with a tiara. Tom Shaw was obviously in no mood for pleasantries. "I think we better sort this out right now," he said. And that was how Emma came to be sitting over calming chamomile tea with the stranger whose bed she'd been sleeping in for a month. It seemed that Tom had been backpacking abroad and hadn't realized his ex-flatmate had sublet the flat. On the return journey from Australia, all he dreamed of was the comfort of his own bed. So he was pretty annoyed to find a strange woman in it. "Look, I don't want to seem ungallant," he said, "but if you could see your way to moving out of the flat as soon as possible." "It won't be easy to find anywhere at short notice," Emma protested. "You'll have till the end of the month," he replied curtly, before heading off to bed down in the box room. For the next week, Emma and Tom did their best to avoid one another. Not easy in a 2-bedroom flat. Emma made allowances for Tom. He was jet-lagged. His biorhythms were shot. But even so, he struck her as one of the rudest individuals she'd ever met. He was barely civil when they collided in the hall or came upon one another in the kitchen. He made Emma feel about as welcome in the flat as a Death Watch beetle. David wasn't too keen on the arrangement either. "Doesn't look good, my fiancé sharing with another man," he said. "Oh, it's only till I find somewhere else," Emma insisted. "Don't worry, Tom has no interest in me, nor I in him," she added hastily. In fact, Tom seemed totally oblivious to Emma, which made it all the more odd when one night he wandered into her bedroom without knocking. Emma was sitting at her dressing table, trying out a facial exercise she heard cured a double chin. Then behind her in the mirror, she glimpsed Tom. Since she was wearing her petticoat at the time and pulling a face reminiscent of Rowan Atkinson, she very much resented the intrusion. She decided to give him a piece of her mind. "How dare you just barge into my bedroom," she demanded, barging into his bedroom. Tom was obviously affronted. "I have absolutely no interest in entering your room." "Well, I'll be locking my door from now on," she yelled before turning on her heel. In the light of day, Emma regretted her outburst. Once the sun brightened her room, she began to doubt she'd actually seen Tom in the mirror. With her imagination, it was probably just the reflection of her dressing gown on the door. She went to apologize to Tom, but he was nowhere in the flat, She had to make up to him somehow. She decided she'd tidy up a bit. She hoovered. She dusted. She even braved the laundry basket. Then she thought she'd put some of her unpacked belongings up in the attic, out of Tom's way. She was just about to scale the stairs to the loft when he appeared. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Stay out of the attic," he yelled. Emma turned, shocked at his reaction. She'd heard of something nasty in the woodpile, but here it seemed there was something pretty worrying lurking in the loft. What did he have to hide?
Gosh, the story goes on, and there's 3 more days of it. Isn't it fantastic?
Yeah, Jason Connery every day reading it too. Somebody's just phoned in to say, why don't you read the story?
More prepared to listen.
It's smelly, that one.
This is very Brit, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Why do you have to have milk in your tea?
You look a picture
I'm trying to think what we're going to do now. Shall we have the story?
Yeah.
Can you cope with the story? Feeling romantic today, Bob?
Fabulously romantic.
Good, but about the tie. It is time for the latest episode of your favourite and ours, the Daily Love Story.
Yes, now you'll remember that Emma is installed in her new flat and is very happy there until the owner, Tom Shaw, returns and is furious to find her there. He didn't know that the previous tenant had sublet the flat.
You'd turn if I looked at Pratt, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Though her fiancé David is very tight-lipped about her sharing with another man, Tom grumpily agrees to let Emma stay until the end of the month, but he forbids her to go into the attic. What has he got to hide?
I don't know. A bit worried about it,
Find out
really.
in a minute, I think.
Now Emma was really intrigued. Tom's over-the-top reaction when he'd caught her heading for the loft suggested he was concealing something pretty interesting up there. But what? A skeleton in a rocking chair? A mad wife? No, this was hardly Psycho or Jane Eyre. Emma's imagination was running riot. When she told her fiancé David about her suspicions, he was pretty scathing, as usual. "Really, Emma, you must stop dramatizing things," he said. "First you say the house is haunted. Now you reckon your flatmate's hiding some deep, dark secret. Who do you think he is, then? Crippen?" The truth was, Emma prided herself on her instincts when it came to people. Despite his gruffness and his lack of social graces, she couldn't bring herself to dislike Tom. All the same, she felt distinctly uneasy in his presence. He was a troubled man, and she knew the key to his troubles were right before her eyes, or at least right over her head, up there in the loft. Tom had made it plain he didn't want her prying, but every time she was alone in the flat, Emma felt drawn towards the attic. Of course, she knew she shouldn't give in to her curiosity. She told herself that Tom had been good enough to let her stay on in the flat till she'd found somewhere else, so she really should respect his privacy. She was still telling herself this as she climbed up into the loft, like some horror movie heroine who just has to see what's lurking up there in the dark. She stumbled into the loft, shining her torch nervously into all the nooks and crannies. Cobwebs brushed against her face, and the dust caught in her throat. She began to wonder what on earth she was doing up here. The torch beam picked out nothing more interesting than the skeleton of an old bike, a broken hula hoop, and piles of ancient LPs. Then she spotted the tea chest. A framed photograph lay on top, a picture of a beautiful girl signed, "To Darling Tom, Love Always, Sarah." She knew she shouldn't dig deeper. She certainly shouldn't open the letter that lay just beneath the photograph, but there was no resisting the urge to read on. "Dear Tom," the letter said, "by the time you read this, I'll be on a plane. Sorry I had to end things this way, but I've found someone else." The letter was dated several months before and signed, "Yours, Sarah." Just reading it, Emma's eyes filled with tears. Poor Tom. No wonder he wasn't exactly a ray of sunshine these days. He'd obviously had his heart well and truly broken. He was plainly sentimental, too. The chests were full of mementos of the girl who'd walked out on him, holiday snaps of them together, Valentine's cards they'd exchanged, even a Care Bear and a pressed red rose. Emma could contain her tears no longer. Only this time she wasn't crying for Tom. She was weeping because she couldn't imagine David keeping similar mementos of her. The only souvenirs he ever kept were programs of rugby cup finals. Suddenly Emma heard a noise, a slight rustling. Maybe a mouse, maybe the wind in the eaves. Whatever it was, it gave her a start. She couldn't get out of the loft fast enough. Scurrying down the stairs, she slipped, almost landing on Tom as he walked in. "Oh, Tom, I'm sorry," she blurted, as he helped her to her feet. "I just went up to the loft to store some of my stuff." It sounded pretty feeble, but Tom took it all in his stride. Emma couldn't believe he wasn't angry. The man was full of surprises. He actually smiled. "I can't be annoyed with anyone today," he said. "I've got myself a job. I'm putting the past behind me. So why don't you clear the cobwebs from your hair and come out to celebrate?" She hesitated. "Well, I suppose I could," she said. "My fiancé's working late again tonight." Emma did feel a little guilty, imagining David slaving away at the office while she sat back sipping wine with Tom in some quaint coaching inn. Tom had anticipated her taste in pubs perfectly. "Just my sixth sense," he explained, as she enthused over the mellow wood panelling and the open fire. "I'm glad you came tonight," Tom said. "You and I got off on the wrong foot. It's just when I first saw you, you reminded me painfully of someone who is definitely in my past." He raised his glass to her. "Let's drink to starting afresh." Smiling, Emma chinked her glass against his. Looking back, she couldn't say what made her turn her head just then, in time to see a tall man with a girl who looked like she'd walked off the set of an American soap. From the back view, the man bore an uncanny resemblance to David. He even dressed and moved like David. It couldn't be him, of course. It was just her imagination playing tricks once more.
Thanks, Jason. Tells it so well, doesn't he?
Absolutely.
Could I
Goes
just
so
make
well
one
when you're
correction?
eating Caesar salad as
Yeah,
well.
I'm going to have to do most of the talking at the moment because Claire has just...
No, maybe not.
No, I'd rather you didn't.
I'd like to, though. Now, it's Kindred Spirits we're talking today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, remember Emma and her rather sensible fiancé, David.
Yeah, well, Emma is still sharing a flat with her moody landlord, Tom. But once she secretly discovers the love of his life has left him, she understands his moods much
Yes, he's
better,
not
doesn't
so
she?
bad,
No,
after
you
all,
see.
there's
So
a
didn't I say
reason
that?
for
Didn't I say
moodiness.
that to you privately, that I thought he was all right?
Actually, you said it to me yesterday. I'm surprised you're right there, because
Far
don't
better than
usually
he
read
appears.
the mind that
No,
well.
no.
Anyway, one evening, she is
He
out
is
for
moody, gosh.
Well, he is very moody, yes, but now there's an excuse for it, so it's not
Yeah,
so
I
bad. As
think
long
it's
as she
fair
understands
enough.
him. You know, always going on about being understood.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, she's out for a friendly drink
But
with
he is
Tom.
moody, very moody.
When she thinks she sees David, though.
What, with another woman?
Yes, exactly.
You're joking.
No.
Emma simply refused to believe that David might be unfaithful to her. He was hardly the Casanova type. He was a solid, dependable man whose love for her ran deep. True, he didn't go in for the hearts and flower stuff, but she simply put that down to the fact that he had Virgo rising. All right, to some David was no Prince Charming, but when he invited her to the ball, or at least to his firm's dinner dance, she decided to say nothing about the girl she'd seen in the bar. "Wear something a bit special," he said, the night he called round with the tickets. "I want to be really proud of you." Emma hadn't noticed the hint of implied criticism. She was too busy worrying about whether she'd still get into her one good dress, a little bridesmaid's number that had already been altered more times than Michael Jackson's profile. She decided she couldn't let the dress out one more time. The fragile material simply wouldn't take it. She didn't want to risk embarrassing David by splitting her seam in the middle of the conga. "All the top management will be there," David had said, "and it's amazing how it can boost your chances of promotion if your fiancé looks the part." There was nothing for it but to slim into the dress. Most meal times, Tom would tuck into bacon and eggs, while Emma was a martyr to a slim quick shake which looked and tasted like butterscotch-flavoured wallpaper paste. Still, she was rewarded by a new sylph-like shape in time for the dance. On the big night, she fussed over her hair, redid her makeup several times, and panicked over her choice of jewellery. "Did she look all right?" she asked Tom desperately. "You look beautiful," he said simply. It sounded too intimate somehow. Emma felt uncomfortable, particularly when he offered to do her up. The mere touch of his fingers against her skin sent what felt like an electric charge zapping down her spine. Emma was shocked in more ways than one. This was pretty unseemly behaviour for an engaged woman, she told herself. Luckily, David arrived just then, and didn't seem to notice her lack of composure as he bundled her out of the flat. David had a horror of being late. "So how do I look in this dress?" she asked him, willing him to say the right thing. "Oh, fine, fine. The neckline's a bit low, but otherwise it's fine." From then on, of course, the evening was doomed. She felt somehow she'd let David down by turning up in a less than tasteful dress. Not that hers was the most flamboyant outfit by any means. For instance, there was one vaguely familiar figure in a slinky number that left very little to the imagination. This girl was the centre of attention, all right. Even David didn't seem to be able to take his eyes off her. Later, Emma returned from the powder room to find David at the bar talking heatedly with the same girl. Then it dawned on her. She was the one from the pub. And seeing them together, Emma knew the man she'd been with was undoubtedly David. "I want to leave this minute," she told him as he returned with the drinks. "I know all about you and that girl." "For God's sake, Emma, what on earth are you dreaming up now? The girl simply works with me." "I don't believe you, David," Emma cried, "and I'm leaving, with or without you." Blinded by tears, she stumbled to the door, running into the street and hailing a cab before David could follow. That night, she cried herself to sleep. She dreamt she was drowning in a vat of Slim You Quick shake, and the man she loved wasn't even trying to save her. He was too busy with some slinky brunette. Confusingly, the man she loved had Tom's face. She awoke with a start, around 3. The dream was obviously a product of her recent starvation diet. She got up to go to the fridge for a slice of something calorie-packed and comforting. Groggy still, she tiptoed out into the darkened hall, careful not to wake Tom. But it looked like he was already awake. There he was, heading for the kitchen. Funny the way he appeared to be floating. Wait a minute. Emma was suddenly wide awake. She backed down the hall like a bat out of hell on rewind and burst into Tom's room. Sleepily, he pulled her down as she leaned over him, throwing an arm around her and nuzzling into her neck. She struggled, sort of, and finally he opened one eye. He didn't seem at all amazed to find himself embracing his flatmate. "Tom, I think I've seen a ghost out in the hall," she said. "Oh, yeah, that'll be Percy," he said, matter-of-factly, and he stifled a yawn.
Who's Percy?
Well, exactly. Every house should have one.
Well, some do.
I know.
Do you?
Yes, I think so, yes.
She was struggling to get in that dress a bit, wasn't she, Emma? Bless her.
It was a little tight, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
I liked it, though, to be fair.
Yes, I thought you did.
Yeah. Please.
So did Percy.
Anyway, sex is a subject of our phone-in later, but...
I know who it's read by, though.
Ah, yes.
Jason Connery.
Jason.
Right.
Let me just recap on the story.
Isn't it funny how there's always a cup of tea waiting? It's really
Yeah,
nice,
and mine's
isn't it?
usually cold.
Never like this at home,
Can I?
you know.
Excuse me.
Okay,
Yeah, that's all right, isn't it? Mm.
good. Now,
Right.
back to Kindred Spirit.
Hello again. Emma is engaged to sensible David.
But is becoming alarmingly attracted to her landlord, Tom.
Now, at David's firm's dinner dance, you got that? David's. Is he the sensible one? Yes.
Yes.
He would be. They would never have a dinner dance if he wasn't sensible. She suspects he's been having an affair with a girl he works with.
Yes, and so she storms out.
Understandably. That night, she sees a ghost in the flat.
And scared out of her wits, she wakes Tom to tell him.
Oh, yeah, he says casually, "That'd be Percy."
I thought so.
Emma woke reluctantly from a wonderful dream. She was walking down the aisle on the arm of the man she loved. She didn't find it odd that, in this dream, the groom was wearing a top hat and pyjamas and had Tom's face. She felt blissful as she floated back into consciousness, stretching luxuriously. Then the memory of the night before hit her. Oh no, she'd run out on her fiancé, ended up in her flatmate's arms, and been haunted by a ghost called Percy. It was too ridiculous. She was just convincing herself that she'd imagined it all when Tom wandered in. "I think I should tell you about Percy," he said. The more he explained, the more far-fetched it all sounded. It seemed Tom had inherited this flat from his great-uncle Percy, a gentleman who, according to family legend, had died of a broken heart. "Percy doesn't mean any harm," Tom said, "but he tends to appear at times of emotional turmoil." Well, turmoil was certainly the word for Emma's feelings. Here she was, an engaged woman, attracted to her flatmate. Worse, she'd probably leapt to all the wrong conclusions when she saw her fiancé with that girl. She had to give him a chance to explain. She rehearsed her conciliatory speech several times before phoning David.
David?
"Well, once again, you overreacted, Emma," he said, grudgingly forgiving her. "Still, There is one way you can make it up to me. Emma was too confused to wonder how she'd ended up the guilty party. It seemed David's boss had invited them both to dinner that night, and David would pick her up at 7. Emma was taking no chances. By 6, her hair and makeup were done, and her smartest dress was hanging up over the bath to steam away any creases. With military precision, she laid out everything she'd need for the evening. Handbag, lipstick, perfume. All she had to do now was slip into her dress. Humming to herself, she sauntered into the bathroom.
Oh, no!
The dress she'd hung up so carefully over the bath had somehow managed to fall into the water. Emma panicked. She heard Tom yell a curt goodbye, and she was frantically wringing out the drenched rag that was her dress, and then the front door slammed. Emma had no time to dwell on this. She had to find something decent to wear, but for some reason the wardrobe door was stuck fast. Then she heard running water. She ran to the bathroom to find the basin overflowing. A tap was jammed on. She started to bail it out. This was turning into a nightmare version of It's a Knockout. She ran to the phone to call an emergency plumber, but the line was dead. Then she noticed her car keys had mysteriously disappeared from the hall table. It was almost as if someone somewhere didn't want her to leave this flat. Percy. It had to be Percy. At this thought, Emma fell to pieces into a weeping heap. Of course, at this precise moment, David arrived, to be faced with the hysterical fiancée. He looked aghast at the sight of her. "Why aren't you dressed?" He was even more aghast after her almost incoherent explanation. "I've put up with all your astrology nonsense, but are you seriously telling me that a ghost named Percy has been trying to keep you here? Really, Emma, I'm beginning to think you need therapy." Emma at last saw red. "And what about you, off with another girl the minute my back's turned?" "Oh, for God's sake," he said. "That was just a little fling. It didn't mean anything." Of course, it was the worst thing he could have said. Emma was suddenly calm. "It's over, David," she said. "It'll never work between us. I see that now. I'm a fire sign, and you're, well, you're what Chinese astrologers term a rat." Once the furious David had stormed off, Emma sat for quite some time in a now peaceful apartment. Everything was back to normal. It was as if she'd imagined it all, only she knew she hadn't. Tom knew it too, when he returned later to find her sitting there, dazed. "I don't think Percy wanted you to end up with David any more than I do," he said. "I've a feeling he planned this to push us together, and who are we to fight the supernatural?" "Say you'll stay with me," Tom begged. "You mean live with you and Percy?" Emma asked. "Well, with me, anyway. Percy won't stick around now. He's accomplished what he set out to do. Hasn't he?" he asked, looking at her in a way that made her hope Percy wasn't watching. Emma decided the only possible answer was yes. Tom took her in his arms, and there was nothing otherworldly about his kiss. Then there was a sudden rush of air. The curtains fluttered frantically, and the fire danced in celebration. Some might have said it was a cross draught, a freak breeze from the open window. But Emma knew it was simply Percy making a tactful and timely exit.
Well, you never know, do you?
It ended with a kiss, so that has to be all right.
Not for the first time, I have to say.
No, most Fridays end with a kiss. It's rather nice,
It is, isn't it? It was just who's going to kiss who, isn't it? Anyway, I hope you're happy with that one. Now,